Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and I am reporting on the final days of my trip to India. I'm doing a bit of a conclusion of the whole trip. As you can see, I'm not in India now. I'm back in England, and it's actually been a couple of weeks since I was in India, which has given me time to reflect on stuff and muse about it and think about stuff. But yeah, what an incredible trip. That's the first thing to say. A wonderful trip as always. I went to India 10 years ago. I had a great time then, and I've had a great time again. And I'm pretty certain that, God willing, I will be going again at least once, probably several more times. There is so much to see in that country. But before I talk about all that, I'm going to talk about what I saw on the last 2 days. So the last day that I had, I woke up late. I didn't really have any appointments, but I went back into the centre, and I went to the there was a museum opposite the Shishgand Gurdwara, a Sikh museum, but it wasn't really a museum. It was more a collection of pictures, and unfortunately, I don't have any videos of them because you weren't allowed to film in there. But there were pictures going through the history of the gurus and also things from Sikh history, and they were very good if you knew what was happening. But the problem was there was no explanation as to what was happening. Now, I know a bit about Sikh history, so the vast majority made sense to me, but I think for the casual visitor it would be a bit disappointing because you're just looking at a load of pictures of beardy guys and you don't quite know who they are or what the context is of that. But I found it interesting, and I was glad I went. The other place that I went to on that day was I went to New Delhi, to the centre of New Delhi, and I went to I went and chilled out and read and drank coffee for a while and went very Western. But I also went to a bookshop. I wanted to go to a bookshop, and there was one there, the Jain Book Depot, which is meant to be very good. So I went in there and I bought several books, and I don't have them all with me now. But I'd seen in the airport one called The Forest of Enchantments. And I'm just trying to think. Chitra Banerjee Devedka, I think was the name of the author. I'll put the details in below. And it was described as a retelling of the Ramayana from a feminist perspective, like it's Sita's story. It's the Sitayana, as it were. And I thought, well, that looks quite interesting. I'll buy that at the end of my trip. And I went in there, and I couldn't remember the name of the book. But I asked for, have they got like retellings of the Mahabharata or Ramayana? And I got several. I didn't get that one. I have since bought it and read it, and it's really good. But I did buy several by this author, Kavita Kane. This one is Sita's sister, which is another retelling of the Ramayana, but from one of the minor characters. And there's several more that I bought as well. This genre seems to be popular, where you retell Indian epics for the modern day, and often focusing on some of the lesser characters. So the other one I read by her was Karna's Wife. Now, I actually think the Chitra Banerjee Devedka was a better writer. But those are interesting. And I'm really glad I've been reading them, because perhaps my main reason, apart from the cricket, for going to India was to try and get my head around Hinduism. Of the 6 major religions of the world, it's the one that I've always really struggled to understand. And while I was there, I think I did understand a lot more. I talked earlier about the kind of earthiness and primeval nature of it, and had some great experiences in some temples. But what I was acutely aware of is that if you don't know the backstories to all these deities, they don't make sense. And of course, the one who always did make sense to me was Krishna because I knew the backstory. I'd learnt the backstory, and so Krishna made sense. And actually, the good place to start, because there's this whole mythology, but the good place to start is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which are both like epic poems. And in those, a lot of the gods and the deities that we hear about play a part. So the Ramayana is Ram, or Rama as he's sometimes called, Sita, but the Hanuman, the monkey king is there, and numerous others. And there's that one, and then the Mahabharata is about the war between the Pandavas and I forget the other one. Krishna's involved, and numerous other characters. And Indraprastha is the capital of the Pandavas, and Hastinapur is the capital of the others. And again, none of it makes sense unless you know the stories. But when you know the stories, it's really good. And what I got was, I'm beginning to really get my head around it and see how it all kind of fits together. And I love how complex the characters are. So even though Ram is a god, he makes some very human mistakes as well. They're not gods like the Abrahamic, omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent God. But they can teach us so much, almost more like saints, really, where you see their human flaws, but you also see their divine aspects as well. And of course, the character that I'm most reminded of is King David, who, was very good at times, but he also fell around the Bathsheba incident. So that's that. So, yeah, did that, then, got on the plane late at night and flew to Bahrain. Now, Bahrain, I should say I stayed at the same hotel that I'd stayed before as well, yeah. Bahrain, of course, I'd seen what I really could see on my first stopover, but I thought, well, okay, what I hadn't seen already was the National Museum and Art Gallery, which is in the capital, not so far from the airport, so I thought I'd go there. But I had a bit of a problem in that I'd basically bought duty-free in Delhi, not thinking. And then, of course, if I carry the duty-free through and then come back, they might charge me duty on it. And so what I did is I told them about what I'd done. And after, going from one department to another, they said, look, just go through, we won't care on the way back. And they didn't. And so I went out and I went to the National Museum and National Art Gallery of Bahrain, which is in a very swish building. Not many visitors, but of course, Ramadan started. So, everybody's fasting now. And the art gallery side, there wasn't a lot that took my interest, really. There was a film of, like, a kind of shifting suns and stuff that was quite nice. Couple of interesting paintings, but, it's not one of the world's great art collections. The museum, though, was far better. There was the standard, Gulf Arab stuff that I've seen in like Dubai and other places in the region. But of course, you've got the whole Dilmun culture, and the Dilmun culture is ancient, and it was really, really well done in that museum. They went through the whole history of it. This ancient trading culture, and of course, it established itself on Bahrain because there was salt water there, but also fresh water. The name of the country means like the two waters or the two seas, and famous for burial mounds. I never saw any of those because they're in the other bit of Bahrain where I didn't go, but yeah, famous for burial mounds, and they had a couple like reconstructed in the museum, and it was very interesting, and they talk about the old religion of Dilmun people, and it seemed to bear quite a lot in common with Mesopotamia. So there we are. So that was the end of the trip. In conclusion, well, I'd gone with two aims. My one aim was to watch some cricket, which I did. Okay, so the bad thing is England didn't win any of it. And that fourth test, the one in Ranchi, they could have won. So that's a bit disappointing, but it actually didn't really impact very much, And I loved the idea of watching cricket abroad. I didn't know how well I would take to it, but it what it served very well, particularly the Dharamshala test, is I got to the point I was mentally and physically exhausted. I couldn't take any more in, which I often get towards the end of a trip. And it was my equivalent of a beach day. And I don't really do beaches that easily, but this was my equivalent of a beach day, and it worked. And what wonderful setting. And it's also so friendly. It's a really good way to get chatting to people. And not just Indians, who obviously you're going to chat to, but also other England fans who, could share their experiences. And it was nice. I really enjoyed the cricket experience. I want to go and watch England play abroad again. I think it's a good thing to do, and it's not that expensive. Now, if you go on the organised tour as it is, apparently a Barmy Army tour, just for that final test, was over £3,000. Now, how on earth are they getting those figures? When you're looking at £600-700 for a flight, I mean, where are they staying? Have they rented their own palace? I don't know. I mean, obviously there's going to be internal flights up to Dharamshala, but it's only one test. The mind boggles. But yeah, so there's that. So yes, the cricket. I'd love to do a tour of Sri Lanka. And actually, one guy was talking about how good South Africa tours are. And that wasn't one I'd ever really thought of. But yeah, why not? So there's that. The other thing was, of course, to travel through India, and particularly to do a trip along the Ganges, which I've always wanted to do, and to really try and start understanding Hindu culture. And I think I have done that, particularly with Varanasi. I've started to grasp what Hinduism is. It's not the unintelligible mystery that it was before. Now, I've written essays about this, but I think that the two big learning points that I've had is, one is that Hinduism is that glimpse back to the dawn of the agrarian age and where religion as we know it began. And I think that is incredible, and the earthiness, the primeval nature of it. And that, is symbolized by the offerings to Ganga and the arti ceremony, So I think there's that. The second is the importance of myth and storytelling, and using storytelling to tell eternal truths. Now, that kind of came later a bit, but with every other religion, if you compare it to a pilgrimage, like a Camino, there's a route you follow, and it's very clear that you're here, or you might be there, or you might be there, but you're getting there, and so you follow the route to it. Yeah. Whereas very much like a Camino, right? Whereas if you look at Hinduism, it's like this network. It's this myriad of paths through the forest, and which path you're following, there's no clear endpoint or beginning. Which path you're following, I think, depends on which story, which set of myths you're interested in at the time. So is it the Ramayana, is it the Mahabharata, or many of the others, of course, as well. It's not just them. And they interlace with one another, but there's always this local flavour as well. And I think that's a journey that I'm just beginning. Like I say, I'm now reading my second retelling of the Ramayana, and I do have a copy of the Valmiki, a translation of the Valmiki one. So at some time I will have a look at that. And also I have another retelling of the Mahabharata. So I'm going to try and immerse myself in that and get to know those stories very well. And already I'm finding them very powerful. Sita in particular, I find a very powerful character. Rama, I have issues with. I will be honest about that. This one is focusing on Urmila, Sita's sister, who is very much a side character, but she's interesting in her own right. And it's interesting also to see how the different writers look at the same original text, Ramayana, differently and draw different lessons from it. So that's that. Um, if I go to India again, the problem is you go somewhere and then you plan 5 more trips. I'd love to do one to Bangladesh and Nepal. Maybe like flying to Calcutta and then go to Bangladesh and fly up to Nepal and go around there and then fly back to and then go back overland to Calcutta. I would say I like to link them all over land. There is still loads in the north I haven't seen. I mean, I never got up to my springs in Manikaram, but there's loads of stuff in northern Punjab, a lot of Sikh sites that I still want to go to, and more Hindu sites. Now I'm more acquainted with like the Ramayana. I want to go to sites associated with it. Indrapashta I've been to. It's the oldest bit of Delhi, but there's Hastinapur is not that far away. That would be worth going. And of course, I've not even touched the south. So loads to go out there, and in terms of another England cricket tour, Sri Lanka definitely, and Sri Lanka is also tied in with the whole same history and same part of the world. So yeah, there's that, and I guess as a tiny aside, my stop in Bahrain made me realise that aside from Saudi, which I do want to visit one day, there's only one Gulf state I haven't been to now, which is Kuwait. So next time I have a stopover, do I even take a little short flight and go to Kuwait for a day or so just to tick it off? And then I've been to all the Gulf states. I don't know. There's loads to go at. India, I guess the big shock was just how popular Modi is. Elections have either started or are about to start. He's going to win by a landslide. He will be in for a generation. I posted my politics video on Modi and so much feedback. Modi's keyboard warriors are out in force, but I've also had some very balanced feedback from people who can look at different aspects of it. Again, and this is not a criticism or a commendation of Modi, but he seems to be loved in India. He is detested abroad, and I don't think the Indians realise that. Literally everybody I'm speaking to, who there's a lot of Sikhs, a lot of Muslims there, but also a lot of non any Indian religion. They're not impressed at all. And but he's going to be around for a generation. He really is. And whether we like him or not, you got to get used to him. And you can counter some of the points that people make, but one guy left a comment on my video saying, I'm always going to like Modi because he brought electric to my father's village. How can you argue with that? And I'm very much reminded of what Erdogan, a guy I completely can't abide, in Turkey, but he did the very same thing for a lot of rural communities. And actually, if you look at Modi, I think what he's done is he's nicked ideas off Erdogan, he's nicked ideas off the Chinese, he's nicked ideas off, various of these, Netanyahu, these kind of populist dictators, and thought, right, and I'm going to put those in. Which, in some ways is working. I mean, his infrastructure stuff, great, but I do think his privatisation projects will have a nasty end, because privatisation and neoliberalism always does. It never works long term. And, I see the Indians making the same mistakes that we made, and some people say, well, the context is different. I don't think it is. I really don't. But, is that true? Is that just my political bias? I don't know. That's that. I loved the connections I made, OS Islam and Ghulam Rasul. I'm still in touch, and it's fantastic talking to them, and particularly with Ghulam exploring Sufi ideas to a deeper degree. And I'm really interested in some of his ways of synthesizing the Hindu tradition with the Islamic tradition, which doesn't impress everyone, but I think it's brilliant. I think that's true holiness. And so, what he'll do is, he would go to Mecca, for, I don't know, it was the Hajj or Umrah. It was Umrah. But before he would go, because the Quran says, we sent a prophet to every country, he would go to Vrindavan, pay homage to Krishna, the prophet sent to India, and then go to Mecca. And I just thought, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that absolutely what religion should be about? I really do. And I appreciate some people will be horrified by this. But, my gut feeling is you're wrong, and he's right. I think that, exclusivism is never nice. And what he does, he also talked about an Eid al Gulab or something, an Eid of colours, and that's like Holi, and basically how Muslims can use Holi to reflect the colours of Allah, and I think it's wonderful. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? So yeah, so that's that. I'm still struggling to take it all in. Expect essays from me, but also expect me to go back to India one day. This video is probably really bad at summing everything up. I've missed so much off. I've not even talked about how amazing Bulgaria was, just how incredibly atmospheric Varanasi was, and I'd love to go back there. I've not talked about, what I learned about the Tibetans, and my last few days in Delhi, which were great. But there's just too much. That's the problem with India. Too much to take in. I'm going to leave it here, though, because I've waited on long enough. Thank you, everybody, for watching these videos. I really do appreciate it. They've got more views than I think any of my other trips have. And I hope you keep coming back. I will be making more videos. We hope to be going to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan in a few months' time. So keep an eye out for that. It's Uncle Travelling Matt. Keep travelling.